And scene. Hello. Ding, 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 ding. Did you read Station 11? No. The price is wrong. Ben, did you read it all? Yes, I finished it. I only finished it this morning, I will admit. The last section I read this morning. But I did read the book. Book's pretty good. It's not bad. It's not great. It's good. There is a lot of hype around this book. It won some awards. I think because it's a Canadian author that I think it got a lot of attention in Canada. Curious to hear what you thought of the Canadian setting. Yeah, it is. I understand that it's kind of nice to, if you're from Toronto, I guess. I guess this applies anywhere, right? When you read a book and it's referencing real places you know and have been to, that's always a bit of a... I don't know. That's not something that's actually all that important to me, but I understand why some people are like, that's kind of fun. What's the plot? Well, should have read the book. No, and there's also an HBO show. For those of you who don't know how to read, this book was made into a television show, a miniseries, HBO, also called Station 11. All right, 29% of you read the book. I will ask if people liked the book. Not a Q&A. And then I'll do a plot summary. Did you like the book? Because I don't think many people will have disliked it, but I don't know how many people loved it. So like, I loved it. It was good. It was meh. And then for anyone who I did not like. I did not lick. Yeah, meh is your sort of option. Use meh for indifferent. I land in the it was good category. It was good, not great. There was a lot that was like technically good about the book. It was well written. It was very easy to read. And it is, I think, objectively impressive that it wove together a lot of different people at different points of time into a pretty coherent narrative. The big weakness with the book, I think, and I think I saw other people commenting on this in Discord, is just the... I think a lot of the characters felt kind of one-dimensional, or at least I think it's fair to say that I've heard a lot of people read this book and say they didn't really relate to or feel a strong connection to any of the characters. And I'll do a summary and then I'll tell you what I think about that. So Station 11 is a post-apocalyptic end-of-the-world genre of book. But I think its core theme and idea is about approaching the end of the world not from the perspective of people just surviving. It's how do we remember the world that was, and how does art live on, and how does the artifacts of the old world live in that new one. And the world ends in this fictional story due to a pandemic, which might feel relatable. It's the Georgian flu from the country of Georgia, not the state. And we see the outbreak of this flu pandemic from the perspective. The entire story sort of orbits around this Arthur Leander, aging actor, 3 failed marriages, estranged kid, now doing Shakespeare at some theater in Toronto after having a tumultuous Hollywood career of stardom but never being that Oscar-winning actor. He was the only interesting character in the book to me, or the only character I felt kind of invested in. Anyway, he dies on stage before the pandemic arrives, but it's in the hours after his death on stage that people start getting sick and just dying. And we see the rest of the story both in his life and his wives and his friends before the pandemic. And then we also see where everyone sort of in his orbit landed after the pandemic, in the hours in which it was emerging, and then 20 years later. So there's this girl who sees him die on stage. She's just like an extra in the play. And she is, I guess, the closest thing we have to a singular protagonist in the 20 years from then future of people trying to, I won't even say rebuild society, because the point of this book isn't about how society rebuilds after a pandemic. It's more about how they remember the things that made us human. So 20 years in the future, this girl who saw this actor die on stage is now with a traveling troupe of actors and musicians, travel around the Great Lakes region of, I guess, Ontario and Michigan. And they perform Shakespeare and perform music to people. And that's sort of a celebration of art, trying to keep some traditions alive. It is interesting that they're performing Shakespeare. So this is acknowledged in the book, like why in a 20 years from now, not so distant future where everything is falling apart, would the actors be performing Shakespeare? And the simple explanation given in the book is something like people wanted to remember the best of what the world was. And yeah, sorry, survival is insufficient. That's right. One of them is a Star Trek fan, and they have a bit of a motto, this troupe. Survival is insufficient. Basically just meaning it's not enough to just survive. Life has to be more than that. Because Shakespeare was also performed during a plague. I know Shakespeare's own life, if you believe he was a real person, was also... he had a son, I guess, who died of a plague, and a lot of his works came out at a time. What? Let's not get into Shakespeare conspiracy theories. This is such a throwback. My favorite episode ever of the Jenna and Julian podcast is Jenna Marbles going in depth about the theory that someone else wrote all of Shakespeare's plays. That scientist, what's his name? That inventor. Anyway, good stuff if you can find that. Anyway, so yeah, because it's funny to imagine, like, let's say society falls apart tomorrow, and 20 years from now, there's like a troupe of actors going around. Would you expect them to be performing Shakespeare? Or would they be like reciting lines from episodes of Seinfeld or The Big Bang Theory? People are so starved for any sort of form of entertainment. They're not going to be like, oh man, could you do King Henry the Fifth Part 2? They'd be like, no. Can you do that scene from Friends where they're trying to move the couch? Pivot. And they'd all be yucking it up. And then you'd be like, I don't know if I'm made for this world. It's funny because in juxtaposition to this troupe going around performing Shakespeare and like, you know, classical music, they're also, it's noted many times that like as these people are going from town to town, they're looking for relics of the old world. And a lot of that is through the lens of like gossip entertainment magazines, which I thought was an interesting contrast, and I think a pretty deliberate point. My Gen Z coworkers wouldn't understand the Friends reference. Would they understand the King Lear reference? I guess Shakespeare for its time was pop culture, right? At a time where we didn't have as much diversity in pop culture, or what popular art was. I wonder if they did Shakespeare also because there would be lots of actors who remember the lines from before the pandemic if the scripts were lost. Actually, speaking of that, the weird thing is there was no real reflection on literature and the loss of literature so much in this novel, which feels like would have been more relatable to me. But at the same time, yeah, if you're trying to say we had a modern world where people were very used to consuming content passively, I guess plays make more sense for how that would adapt to this new reality. I could recite Fight Club word for word. Ha ha, ha ha ha. I haven't seen that in years. I haven't seen that since grade school. So anyway, this traveling troupe of performers start noticing that some of these towns are starting to feel not so good. And what they've noticed in some of them is that they're sort of being taken over by cultish groups. So that is sort of the antagonist of this book in this modern setting, is this prophet who, spoiler alert, turns out to be the son of Arthur, our actor, who is the sort of nuclear star, the sun, a rich round everyone orbits, the straw that stirs the drink. Anyway, this prophet's going town to town just basically taking women as brides and killing people and stealing their guns. Not a good guy. They should have kept that Tyler in the basement. Yes, that's true. Children, not women. Oh, yeah. It's when the troop passes through one of the towns, they realize a 12-year-old girl has hidden in their stuff, and she's escaping because she's been promised to the prophet. So yes, we are talking a child bride situation. It's interesting that a lot of end-of-the-world fiction paints a portrait of society that is very, I don't know if I want to say realistic or pessimistic about how much people would devolve into these really base tendencies if order sort of fell. You know what I mean? Is there an end-of-the-world book that shows societies functioning fairly well? And that, it's not just about all of a sudden men enslaving women as sex slaves. It is quite a pessimistic view of people, and I'm not saying it's wrong. I think there's a reason why people's heads go there. I mean, is that not what would happen? I mean, I think it is, but then we also live in a... How do I put this? I don't know if it's a conservative worldview, but it's a worldview that is the only thing stopping people from doing that now. Just the fact that we live a sort of comfortable capitalistic existence. I don't think it would be an interesting story. I think I disagree with you. You know what? The most interesting thing about this book wasn't the conflict between the prophet and the troupe and comic books. It was Arthur's life and his inability to have a human connection with anyone, including any of his 3 wives. So that was the most interesting part of this book, and it had nothing to do with the world ending. It had something to do with a guy who never really lived an authentic life. And what was interesting is the framing of him sort of realizing he was getting towards the end of his life and he hadn't really lived much of a life at all. So this sort of theme of mortality, I think, was relevant. But I don't think you needed the end of the world framing to tell that story. It kind of feels like, in a way, the author wanted to write a story about like this very flawed aging actor and kind of put it in the Trojan horse of an end of the world book. Should have just write that book about the actor. There are a lot of pockets of apocalypse right now in Sudan, Libya, Afghanistan. They all have such high rates of gender-based and sexual violence. Yeah, no, that's not lost on me. And I guess, I agree with this worldview that a lot of what keeps order in society is sort of held together with tape. Right, Menchie? What are you doing? What are you doing? What? You wanna come here? Come up. I wanna see you. Oh, come here. Meow, meow. Sorry, Menchie wants to cuddle. No more book club. I think the 3 wives represent King Lear's 3 daughters and how Miranda was like cast out with nothing but came back around at the end. If that's true, it was lost on me. I don't know my Shakespeare very well. Although, if that was a very deliberate thing, did that feel like it was explicit to you? There were a few like sort of loose threads introduced in this book that I thought would resolve in a way, but I didn't really see it. In times of great crisis like Hurricane Helene, it is amazing to see what lengths most people went to help each other before the government could get there. Most people, I think, are good people. See, that's sort of the interesting duality. Is it that absent a sort of functional government or societal order, people are reduced to sort of the most base instincts? Or is it that most people have this sort of inherent tendency to good or care for one another, or some, is the golden rule at least somewhat innate? And it's just a small proportion that would fuck up everything for everyone else. I struggle with this question myself personally, but I do find myself frustrated with people whose worldview seems very comfortably kind of ignorant of this reality, like how we're only a few steps removed from living very uncomfortable lives of misery, that you, even in some awful situation today, you probably live a much more comfortable life than, the 2 or 3 generations before you. And a lot of the rights you have today aren't naturally God-given. They're the result of a lot of people sacrificing everything so that you could have a better life than they did. And I feel like this is a very boomer take I'm giving you, I guess, but I think just an objectively true one. I feel like a lot of people feel very comfortably ignorant of that fact. Anyway, back to the book. We're like, so there's this prophet and the troop, and this 12-year-old would-be child bride escapes with him, and Prophet's not too happy about that, so he sends some of his men to chase him down, and that's sort of the conflict in that timeline. They're trying to get to an airport to find people where there's a bit of a, I guess someone has set up like a museum of remembering how things were. Clark's Museum, yes. Right, Menchie? Anyway, I'm not sure what else to say about the book. It's an interesting idea. I think a lot of people like it because it is a bit of an inversion of your typical end of the world story, and that it's less focused on just like troops of survivors surviving zombies, and more about what art and culture looks like in a society like that. But it didn't feel like the characterization gave you a lot of people to really feel truly connected or invested in. And for me, the only exception to that was the actor who died before the pandemic even happened. So yeah, it's an interesting take on a genre. It's well written. But yeah, I don't think it's just like the hype I'm letting get to me. I just feel like it kind of left me wanting a little bit more than it gave. Hey. You okay? Menchie's being very sweet today. Why are you being so sweet? One of the themes is how when faced with struggles, people often turn to faith. I thought they could do something really interesting with... So the fact that the prophet turned out to be the son of the actor... I was expecting the book to offer more of a take on how acting and performance... So you have like this troupe of actors performing Shakespeare, and for them, acting is a way of sort of preserving some connection to the cultural artifacts of the world that was. And I thought the prophet being the son of the actor and him being a cult leader, I thought that would be more explicitly this idea of like how acting and performance could be used to basically corrupt and take advantage of people and instill some of like the bad tendencies and practices of like mostly religious sects or something. I thought there'd be a sort of interplay of this idea of like acting and performance and fiction, but I don't think the book really went there in a meaningful way. Am I wrong? And even like to the extent that the book is sort of playing with this idea of like 1.2 characters have a conversation about whether or not it's even ethical to teach people born into this new world about the world that was, because like what's the chance it's ever going to be like that again? Like what are we really giving these people? And I felt like those conversations happened, like that's an interesting conversation. And these conversations about the importance of maintaining some connection to the past happened. But then I never really felt like anyone really expressed in a profound or very meaningful way why it mattered to them to keep these traditions or things alive. Everything, especially in this 20 years in the future timeline of society, felt pretty surface level. I like that the book left it up to the reader to think about those things more. Yeah, I'm okay with the book leaving you to do some legwork and just think about these ideas. And it's prompted that conversation, let's say. But I just don't know if the book had a whole lot to say about that. On religion, some writers have posited that our separation from religion trend towards atheism makes people more susceptible to cults because we lose ourselves and our personalities more easily. I don't know if I agree with the second half of that. I think people crave wanting to believe in something to give their lives meaning, and religion offers that answer to a lot of people. And religion also is a way of just bringing community to people in a way that I think secular or atheistic societies kind of struggle with. And I'm saying this as someone who doesn't believe in any organized religion. You know, there isn't really a secular substitute for going to church on Sunday and greeting your neighbors. So there is something to be said for that, especially in a society where things are more comfortable. I don't think I agree that atheism in and of itself makes people more susceptible to cults. I think there's just a natural human tendency to want to believe in things. Yeah. That's bleak. Community building is happening all the time. Well, yeah, sure. Yeah, of course. I mean, we're social animals, right? It would be very sad if there wasn't community building. This is my church. But yeah, is this relatable? Don't you feel increasingly there are people who like don't know their own neighbors, don't really know anyone in their own communities? I'm sure there are polls on this, like a decrease in people, the number of friends people have, number of relationships people have. I think that is one of the sort of weird negative consequences of a more information age society. It's easy to fall into a cult when on hard times. Yeah, I believe that too. Or I don't think it's a coincidence that people often turn just to religion when they are at very difficult points in their life too, right? There's a reason why people in prison often turn to religion. Anyway, this took a weird turn. You know what's weird? This book didn't feel that heavy. This is actually, I think, another criticism of the book for me, is that at no point did it feel like there was a lot of jeopardy or a lot at stake. Which is strange to say because there are parts of the book where we're talking about, like, you know, that Kirsten, the girl, female protagonist girl, like, is maybe gonna get shot by the prophet. And they have this brief moment of connection over a comic book they both got from Arthur's first wife. Anyway, it never felt like anyone was really in danger for some reason, even though people objectively just obviously were in danger all the time. Just for some reason, it never felt high stakes. Am I wrong about that? When you were reading this book, did it feel like there was like a lot of gravity to like the seriousness of the situations they were in? Because like I didn't get that at all. I liked that it wasn't dark. Yeah. You don't always want to read very dark. Yeah, I get that. It gave more young adult novel for sure. Yeah, it did feel a little bit like a book you would assign to kids in high school. That probably sounds really condescending, but I think you guys know what I mean. It was not dark or intense or feel super... It kind of felt clinical, even when it was describing more devastating or heavy things. Anyway, I might watch the show. I think it's 10 episodes. It's like 10 hours of content. I'm very curious to see if they change the emphasis. Actually, if anyone here has watched the show, please feel free to spoil or ruin it for me. I don't really care. I would only be watching just out of a curiosity to see what they do or don't emphasize. And if it places more or less emphasis on Arthur pre-pandemic life, or if it's much more focused on the reality of the troop. My mom started it but couldn't finish it. She did not read the book. Like, it was so bad she couldn't finish it. I think Christine watched it. She didn't like it. Yeah, Christine, I didn't love it. She didn't lemon or lime it. Anyway, I thought it might be more fun to watch Contagion, starring Matt Damon, tonight. How do you feel about that? I'm gonna watch it. You're welcome to. Great cast. Tonight, 8:30 p.m., Sunday, December 1st. I guess foreign language film November's over. We made it through most of our movies. Contagion felt like a good tie-in here. And then the rest of December will be snow-themed movies. Rewatched it in 2020. Christine and I watched this movie March 2020. And then we went to Walmart and bought cans of soup. We should watch some Shakespeare. You should go watch some Shakespeare in the park. Is there any good way of watching Shakespeare at home on a television screen? Like, is there a good film adaptation? Is there an answer to... Is this like a universally agreed upon, like, best Shakespeare adaptation on the screen? Whatever happened to ranking all of the End of the World movies 2020 idea? I don't know. I like End of the World movies. You know what my comfort movie is? Greenland with Gerard Butler. I find that movie so comforting. Like, I can just put that on in the background. I know, it's strange. The Kenneth Branagh Hamlet slaps. Is it King Lear with Ian McKellen? I'll post the list of snow movies for December, and maybe this time I'll post a schedule in advance. And I feel like book club will continue in some form next year. I'm just not sure what it will look like yet. And I realize it's already December, so I probably should figure something out there. I think next year I want to read more books that I selfishly want to read without having to sort of turn them into a conversation. If you know what I mean? And not worry about how other people will perceive them. I think this year I got a little hung up on, like... It's interesting. I started the year being like, I'm going to pick some books that, like, I want to read, even if I don't think they're going to be very well received, or even if I sort of disagree with them. And then, like, I really didn't enjoy having to talk about those books when everyone seemed to hate them. You know what I mean? I don't think nonfiction's the best idea for a book club. So I'll probably stick to fiction. And I think I'd like to figure out a way of making it a bit more democratic. So I think fiction, maybe autobiographies, I'm more open to. That might be the one exception to the fiction rule. I just don't know how to make it so other people have a say in choosing books, because when I've brought this up before, you'll just have a few people being like, here's a book I like we could do. And that puts a lot of pressure just on that person. Like, if people don't like that book, then it's all just like looking at that person being like, why did you suggest that book? You know what I mean? Is there a way of doing this that feels a little bit more not just one person suggesting a book? Is there some way of doing a voting or an upvote system, or let's come up with a list of 20 or so books and we sort of pick and choose from that? Like, I feel like there has to be a way of doing this. We read old lady smut books. The one with the shirtless man with flowing hair on the cover. Yeah, okay. Well, that's Marin's vote. Like a Google form ranking system committee? Do we need a committee? I don't know how to come up with a list. I wonder if pulling from some sort of third-party source, like what was the best contemporary fiction of last year, and that sort of being like a launching pad for it. Although there's a part of me that still wants to mix in, there are so many great works of fiction, more sort of classical. There are a lot of books I haven't read that I'd like to, so it's also tough. Let's ask Uma's dad. Yeah. No external sources won't align with this community. What would align with this community, Rashida? Uma's dad? Just asking Uma's dad? Ask Duma? You know, we could just read Moby Dick. The banned book list? That's fun. I'm sure that wouldn't cause any controversial... I'm sure that wouldn't be any tough conversation. Let me think about it. But yeah, I think it would be nice to have a little pause for this December. Hopefully you're celebrating with family or your chosen family, or just yourself, giving yourself a little break this time of year. I find December can be a very depressing time of year. So I hope you find a way of that not being the case for you. Anyway, Christine's streaming in 15 minutes. Menchie Gang stream. I hope you check that out and enjoy that. I know I think she's giving away some stuff. She just keeps giving away things. Like, Christine, what about us? Why give money to charity when you can give money to me? And she goes, no, ban. You love Chris? Yeah, I know you do. I know you like her more than me. That's okay. I'm used to it. Anyway, thank you if you participated in book club at all this year. Even if you didn't read the books, I can't be too mad at you. Because, you know, it's a shame no one taught you how to read.